You ever get that feeling that you're caught in some huge economic storm, but you can't quite see it? You know, one minute you're just trying to figure out mortgage rates, and the next you're hearing about global supply chains and thinking, what does that have to do with me? Well, it turns out everything. So let's dive in and really map out the hidden forces that connect what's in your wallet to what's happening on the world stage.
And this right here, this is exactly where it all begins. This isn't some quote from an economist in a textbook. It's a real person on Reddit, probably a lot like you, just trying to make sense of it all. They're wrestling with a 6.5% mortgage, kind of crossing their fingers for a better rate in a couple of years and asking that big question. Are those crazy low rates we saw a while back gone for good? I mean, that one thought just captures the anxiety so many of us are feeling.
So, how do we connect the dots? What's the invisible string that ties that person's mortgage rate to the price of milk and eggs at the grocery store and even to the security of your job 5 years from now? It's a really complex web of global events, national policies, and, well, we're about to untangle it piece by piece.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with that big question. Why does everything feel so expensive? Then we'll look under the hood at the inflation engine, jump into the whole deregulation debate, and then zoom way out to see how this is all a global thing. After that, we'll look to the future with the AI wave, and finally, we'll tie it all together.
All right, first up, let's tackle that feeling. You know the one. That sense that your paycheck just doesn't stretch as far as it used to. It's not just in your head. It's very real, and it's driven by one really important concept.
And that concept, of course, is inflation. You've heard the word a million times. All it means is that your dollar buys less today than it did yesterday. Simple, right? But what really kicked off this latest surge we've all been dealing with? A lot of people point to government spending, but if you dig into the data, you find a different culprit.
It turns out, according to analysis from the Brookings Institution, the main driver was this massive, unprecedented shock to our global supply chains during the pandemic. Just think about it for a second. Factories were shutting down, shipping containers were stranded on the wrong continents. Just getting a tiny microchip from point A to point B became a total global nightmare.
And this chart just shows you the sheer scale of that problem. Look at this. It's a measure of how long it takes for suppliers to deliver things. Before COVID, see how it's just stable, humming along at zero? Then, bam! Look at that spike during the pandemic. It's just off the charts. We have literally never seen a disruption like it. And even though things have sort of overcorrected now, the ripple effects from that shock are still being felt.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. This shows the delay, the lag effect. So those delivery times, they started getting back to normal way back in late 2022. But look at when companies' own prices, their profit margins, started to follow. Not until mid-2024. There's this 6 to 12-month gap that explains why prices felt so sticky and high, even after it seemed like the shipping mess was over.
Okay, so if supply shocks were a huge part of the problem, what are some of the ideas out there for bringing costs down for good? Well, this leads us straight into one of the biggest and, frankly, most heated policy debates going on right now: deregulation.
The argument in favor of deregulation often gets boiled down to one really powerful number. Back in 2019, a report from the Council of Economic Advisors estimated that by cutting back on certain regulations, the average household could see a net benefit of about $2,500 every single year. I mean, that is a huge claim.
So let's just break down the two sides here. On the one hand, the argument for it, as that report laid out, is that deregulation sparks more competition, makes businesses more productive, and that eventually trickles down to us as lower prices. But there's another side to it. Analysis from Gov1IQ points out that for small businesses, these big shifts can be really tough. It can mean frozen contracts or getting hit with new fees. It's this classic economic debate, right? And it has very real consequences for people, no matter which side you're on.
But as much as we focus on what's happening at home, we have to zoom out. Because this whole inflation story we've been living through, it is so much bigger than any one country.
And here's the crucial point. It wasn't just here. It was everywhere. The price hikes you were seeing were part of this massive global wave. Data from the Council on Foreign Relations shows that median inflation around the world just skyrocketed, from under 2% to almost 9% in just a couple of years. This was a planetary problem.
And a huge reason for that? Geopolitics. I mean, think about it. When Russia, one of the top 3 oil producers on the planet, invaded Ukraine, it threw the entire global energy market into total chaos. At the same time, OPEC and its allies decided to cut production. These moves together squeezed the world's oil supply, sent prices soaring everywhere, and just hammered the most vulnerable economy.
And right here, you can see the absolute extreme end of that crisis.
For countries like Venezuela or South Sudan, we are not talking about 8 or 9% inflation. We are talking about projected rates of nearly 270%, 98%. In these places, inflation isn't just an inconvenience. It is a full-blown humanitarian catastrophe. And it's being driven by war, by sanctions, and by completely broken infrastructure.
So, we've talked about the forces pushing prices up today: supply chains, policy debates, geopolitics. But what about the forces that could completely change the game tomorrow? There is a new wave building, one that could reshape our economic world more than anything we've talked about so far, and that is the rise of AI.
Right, because while we've all been rightfully focused on the price of gas and groceries, AI has been quietly rewriting the fundamental rules of work and productivity. And that, right there, could end up being the biggest economic story of our lifetime.
I mean, just take a look at these numbers from a report by the TIIA Institute. This isn't science fiction. This is the real, projected automation potential for white-collar jobs. For an insurance clerk, 100%. A tax preparer, 83%. And look, even for a highly skilled job like a lawyer, it's a potential automation rate of 32%. This isn't just a small disruption. This is a fundamental redefinition of what economic value even is. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground, right? From clogged ports to global conflicts, all the way to lines of code. So now, let's put all these pieces together and see what this new reality actually looks like.
At the end of the day, the biggest takeaway is this: your personal economic life, your mortgage, your job, it isn't shaped by just one thing. It's a whole ecosystem of forces. It's affected by how fragile our supply chains are, by the constant push and pull of policy debates, by the shock of a war halfway around the world, and by the relentless march of technology like AI. It's all connected.
And that brings us right back to where we started. In a world where all these massive forces are colliding and changing all the time, the real question for all of us is this: which story matters most to our future? Is it the immediate pain of high prices? Or is it the long-term promise and, yeah, maybe the peril of AI? The answer to that question is going to define the world we all live in tomorrow.